Samadhi will introduce, and that main program today, followed by some other slides and a small portion I read from Master's Karma and Disease. That's all in relation to the talk tonight. That will be the program today.
Our main program tonight, our main guest is Dr. Morris Netherton. As I mentioned to you last night, he's a practicing psychotherapist from Los Angeles. He has been distinguished and become renowned for his work that he started back in 1966, working with delinquent children in Los Angeles. He came across past life regression therapy. In the ensuing years, he's developed it, and really for the past 20 years. He told me this afternoon that he's regressed or progressed, but he's performed about 4,000 regressions on various people in that time. And the technique that he's developed, known as the Netherton method, he's developed over that time. He's written about it in his past life regression work. And what he was telling us is that the method that he uses is not a method of hypnosis. Today he's going to speak about this reincarnation and past life regression tonight. Tomorrow he'll do a workshop at which time he'll actually take a volunteer and put them through a regression. He asked me to mention that any of those of you who would be interested in being the subject for that,
my request is, one subject must be done in the lab.
He's agreed to that already.
We got a new, very beautiful e-dimension, the most modern, and we get the color grade.
I put him there, Swami. He agreed to it, and we arranged it.
That's all I want. That's that purpose. Other things you can do here. But one thing I want to get more scientific facts about this.
Okay. So he's agreed to do one experiment in the lab, which we'll do on our own with the scientists. But for the 2 o'clock presentation, the workshop tomorrow afternoon, he will take one of you and actually do a regression here for everyone. Now, what he's asked is those of you who are interested in that, see him afterwards, and then he'll choose a particular subject for that. He has a particular criteria in choosing the person. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce... Yes, the title of the book is Past Lives Therapy, and he's also working on some other books at the moment.
Some other copies are available for people to buy? No. At least they can order, so just give that and we'll order. Certified. Just commercial. You don't want the stand?
No, I would prefer if also I want to stand.
Okay. This you can stand behind it.
If I
can bring that with the table.
No, it's all right.
Okay.
I pace. If I get too fast, would you just throw something at me? I'm used to it.
Take it from there so you can move on.
The first time I tried working with translators, I looked down.
So many languages you have: Spanish, German, French.
I worked in Portuguese, French, English, German, and Spanish.
All that we have.
And Japanese. The first time I worked with a translator, I had spoken about 2 minutes, and I looked down, and 3 people were in a state of shock. They had completely given up, and it took us another 20 minutes to get them unconfused and back into the realm of sanity. So I realized that I was speaking American English twice as fast as any American should ever be speaking it. So I will try not to do that. I do know how to speak good English. First, I would like to thank those who have invited me here I stopped working in summers a long time ago, several years ago, mainly because I am married and I have 2 children, and it was their wish that I did stop spending my summers on the road a lot. Well, they are now 16 and 18 years of age. I don't see them except early in the morning, late at night, and they don't know if I'm there or not. So now I am free with my wife and I to hit the road again. So I'm delighted I could be here. I told those who have greeted me that I wasn't sure in the moment when I received the call to do this exactly why I accepted it, but that's what I do. When I have the phone in my hand and someone says, "Would you come?" I say yes, or I say, "I'm very sorry, but I can't." Now, either of those is perfectly valid. If I say I can't, it means I could always stay home and rest. Or if I say I can, it can mean that I can find time somewhere, somehow, to get it into the schedule, and it's going to be a valuable experience. And I put it in the back of my head, and I have no idea what went on back there. There's a whole part of me back here that I stay out of contact with because it does much better work than I do. And so 2 weeks ago, in my work and session, I began formulating something, and I began to realize why I had said yes. Now, I said yes, 6 months ago? Is that 4 months ago? So, what you're hearing tonight, I hope someone is going to make some notes of what it is, because I'm going to want to know what I said when we're through. When I first began this, I thought I was the only person on the face of this earth who had ever discovered reincarnation. I was born in the state of Tennessee in the United States, which is a southern state. I was born in what is known as the Bible Belt, to parents who are fundamental Christian. To those of you who have any knowledge of fundamental Christianity in the United States, it is not the world's home of reincarnation therapy. And my parents developed an attitude rather quickly, probably within 3 or 4 minutes after my birth, of wondering where I came from and why in the world I chose them. And I remember sitting in church one Sunday when I was 6 years old, swinging my knees, my legs, on the bench, and we're singing hymns of blood and gore and nails and I'm thinking, oh God, I hope this is not all there is to it. Because if it is, this is going to be one long, boring lifetime. So I had a talk with my mother when I was about 16, and I said, "Is it okay with you if I leave?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to go to college, and I'll check in every now and then and see how things are going here." And that's pretty well what I've done. When my book was published, my parents were on vacation, and I couldn't get in touch with them to tell them what I had done. They didn't even know I was writing a book. And my mother was a nurse in a doctor's office, and one of the clients, the doctor's patients, approached her one day with a Time magazine, and she said, "Is this your son?" And my mother said, "What are you reading?" And somebody named Netherton has written a book called Past Lives Therapy. And my mother said, "Is there a picture of him there?" And she said, "Well, no." She said, "I don't think he's my son." And they said, "But his first name is Morris, just like your husband's." She said, "There are lots of Morris Nethertons in the world." But it says here that he was raised. She said, "Oh, shut up." And with that, she took the Time magazine. She said, "Yes, that's my son." So I finally got through to her, and I said, "Mom," she said, "I know. You wrote a book, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah, I did. And I'm sending you some copies of it." And she said, "Okay." And I said, "Try not to burn them before you read them." Now, Up until then, I could go back very often, very easily, and nobody threw arrows at me. After I went back, I got a lot of this. But they read it, and they began sort of thinking maybe it made sense, and they started trying to find some way to accommodate it. I figured you have to accommodate it or get rid of me, and they can't kill me because the body's too big to hide. So they sort of accepted it, and we have come to a truce, and they will let me believe my way, and I will let them believe their way, which is how it started out in the first place. They just didn't know it. When I began to work with this, as I say, I thought I was the only person in the world that had discovered reincarnation, and I stood in awe of the phenomenon for a long, long time. The idea that we lived before on this earth, and that there is a continuity to us, that it goes beyond this blob of protoplasm that you see standing here, and that was a fascinating topic to me because I had not been taught that. I had been taught that you sort of, it's all over and you go up to the pearly gates, and depending on what the big book up there says, they look it up, and you go somewhere else. And I was sure I was going to go somewhere else. I didn't have a chance of getting in there. So when I began to work with this, it was an interesting phenomenon, and it was something that I kept asking myself over a period of time, so what? What good is it? So I lived before. What's that going to do? I began asking friends what they thought about it, and I was surprised, actually. What I got was, well, there's a possibility that that's true, but I don't see what difference it makes in my life. And I had to agree that that was what I was thinking. When I started speaking to groups, I used to do something which was interesting with the groups I first started with. I used to ask, how many of you believe in reincarnation? Now, I did that, so I have some idea of what to expect. I had it worked out. If it was, most of the hands went up that they didn't, and we kept the car engine running. And our degree of safety was sort of determined by how many the hands went down from there. When, I don't think I need to ask this group, do I? When I
No, you can try one.
Okay. How many of you believe in reincarnation? You better be careful. Good. How many of you are wondering what effect it has on your life here and now? How many of you are afraid to find out? Well, let me put your mind to rest. I cannot read your minds. I cannot read your auras. I cannot tell who you were in the past life by looking at you. I do not do instant readings, and I cannot analyze you by hearing you say, good morning, how are you? Well, maybe in your case I could, because nobody can do that. That's not even an authentic activity. When I began to read the great literatures of the world, and I began reading the great masters of the Eastern world, and I was absolutely thunderstruck to learn that they had all of my original thinking first. Now, this does not come easy to a small boy from the hills of Tennessee. I've already accepted the Nobel Prize, the Pulitzer Prize, and I'm on my way to bigger things. And I learned that there's countries in this world where every little child walking around has these things down pat, and they understand them, and it's a way of life. So I sort of was back to the drawing board. But what I did notice, because it worked so well with myself, was if I did a process that involved a therapeutic element to these experiences, and if I did a process which began a process of resolution and integration with the person, then it had a very, very advantageous effect on the person. I discovered this because I went into therapy for myself in 1965. I was married in 1960, and yes, we have been married 29 years. It can be done in the United States, but you do have to bribe certain officials. When I went into therapy, I was speaking with my therapist one day, and I was exhausted. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm very, very tired. I don't know what this is. And she said, close your eyes for a moment. Maybe something's trying to happen. Now, she had no idea what she was talking about. This, she did not mean what was going to happen. So I closed my eyes, and the next thing I heard, I went into a great deal of physical pain. I was pre-ulcerative. I had a prescription for tranquilizers in my pocket. I was suffering migraine headaches, and the doctor that I was seeing at the time just kept saying, take the tranquilizers. You've got to do something. You're going to die if you don't take the tranquilizers. Later on, I was to learn I was going to die if I did take the tranquilizers, but so I didn't take them. But I heard myself suddenly describing, and I started writhing in pain, and I could hear her voice saying, I don't know where you are. I don't know what you're doing, but keep talking to me. Later, I was to learn I scared her to death, because this man lays on her couch and starts screaming, they're killing me, and goes into all sorts of somatic reactions, which is very difficult for her to explain. And you don't know therapists in the United States. We like to explain things a lot. We don't like you getting into places that we can't explain. That's not easy for us. So, about an hour and 20 minutes later, I experienced a great release of pain and experience, and I realized that I was seeing a body lying on the ground, and I wondered who that was, and then I realized that was me. I used to be in that body. When I came back, she said, what was that? And I said, you're the therapist, you tell me what that was. And she said, I don't know. How do you feel? I said, I feel great. So she said, let's decide to do nothing with it. Go on home, forget about it, and let's see what happens. Go home and forget about it. Right. I had just been killed in a foreign land somewhere, and died, left her body, and I'm supposed to forget about this. We did this for 3 or 4 sessions, and I began trying to just deliberately induce it in session. And the first time I did it, when I was going home, the pain was gone. And I thought, well, that's not bad for morning's work. And it got better after that. The 5th session we did this with, I went in home, and my wife was at home at the time, and I went through the door singing, which in itself is a shock for some people. And she said, she just looked up at me and she said, are you all right? I said, I'm fine. Why? She said, you're singing. I said, how odd. That singing should indicate that something's wrong. And she said, no, what's odd is that you haven't done this in a long time. You haven't been happy in a long time. Do you know why you're singing? And I said, is it important? And she said, no. And I said, is it that bad? And she said, well, yes, it is, but it's all right. You can go ahead and sing. And I said, well, can I whistle? And so she said, that's better. So we compromised on whistling. And finally, the 6th or 7th session, she said, where are you going? What are you doing when you leave here? I said, I'm going to therapy. She says, no, you're not. And I said, wait a minute, you know where I'm going. She said, no. No, I know people have gone to therapy. It takes a year. And there's all sorts of misery and death and stuff that comes out of it. You have to hate me, you have to hate your mother, you have to hate your father. You have to kick the dog. And, there's all sorts of stuff you have to do. No, nobody gets better in therapy after 6 weeks. This is not, are you seeing somebody else? And I said, you mean other than the therapist? And she said, yes. I said, no. Go with me sometime. She said, that's a typical philandering husband's answer. No, ask me to go with you. I'm sure that if you were seeing, and so she starts this whole rigmarole. And I said, whoa, I am going into therapy and that's all I'm doing. So she called the therapist. The therapist said, yeah, that's what he's doing. He's here every week. And she said, fine. She says, I don't want to know what he's doing because he's so happy that's fine. And then about another 2 sessions, and something happened with her, and she began feeling very upset and very emotional, and she sort of began to lose it and started losing control. And I looked at her and I said, you know what's happening? And she said, no. And I said, you're going into a past life experience. Have you ever seen a woman turn stark white and start to faint and stop in midair? She said, I'm what? And I said, I'm sorry, you're going into a past life experience. And she said, no. She said, what are you talking about? And I said, look, do me a favor. And I ran my first session. To make a long story short, I ran sessions on every friend I could get my hands on. We invited people over for dinner. They didn't get to eat until they'd done you know what. Before long, our friends would ask what else they had to do before they got dinner, if they were asked. And so I finally realized that I couldn't keep lassoing my friends in and making them go through this, because it wasn't something that any of them were enjoying particularly. And I began then working in my head and at a desk and writing and thinking, and I knew nothing about meditating. I knew nothing about going into myself or into thought. And eventually I began, by just almost accident, to use it with some of the boys in the juvenile hall where I worked. I was in charge of a unit that housed physically and psychologically damaged juvenile delinquents. I worked in the intensive care, behavioral intensive care unit of a juvenile hall. We had 1,000 boys in the total population of the hall. And the first few things I did was very impressive. I myself had to admit that. And before long, I had people saying, send him over to Netherton, let him do his thing with him. And I kept saying, no, don't send him over to Netherton. I'm going to have 1,000 boys lined up outside my door here. But at that point, I began keeping some sort of record, and I began trying to formulate for myself exactly what I was doing. And whatever I talk to you about the rest of this evening and tomorrow will be what I have learned and what I put together after the fact. I have never had a theory and then gone after it. I have developed the theory and the practice after I have been doing the work. So what I talk to you about is something that I know works, because it has been working for about 2 years before I bothered to sit down and put some sort of form or definition to it. I know nothing about other religions of the world, except that I have tried to study since I started doing this, because I realized that I was sort of coming into their territory, and it might be nice as a guest if I knew something about what they stood for and what they believed. And I hold a great deal of respect for it, because I think it is most of them are very kind and gentle religions, and I think that they offer a lot to mankind. And I think that I patterned what I do after that a lot, in that I try to offer a lot to mankind, as many as I can, as much as I can. And it's not something that is a discussion for a Saturday afternoon bridge game. Did you know that we probably have, if we could get them to be honest with us, at least 17 Cleopatras right here in this room? Every woman wants to be Cleopatra. Egypt is the only place anybody ever reincarnated from. I have built that pyramid at least 72 times in my sessions. I'm tired of building pyramids. I finally said to my clients, can we please go work somewhere else? I'm tired of Egypt. It's getting a little boring. So we went somewhere else, and that got even worse. But I have found that it comes in phases, and those phases have each represented a definite part of the human experience, in the human body, human mind, and the human soul. About 10 years ago, my goal became literally one thing: to present to those I work with and those that listen to me a unified theory of the total person. I'm sorry we ever started to do the dualistic approach of mind and body that don't go together. And the Western man believes you have your mind over here and your body over there, and never these two are supposed to meet. And we are in the process now of completing studies that will show that you can access the memory, you can access experience, you can access emotion from any part of man's system. You do not have to use only one part of it. There are things that each part of your body is doing that any other part of your body is doing. And this is not something I dreamed up on a couch somewhere. Its research is being finished even today at the National Institutes of Mental Health. All we have to do is get them to admit it and publish it, because they don't want anybody to know about it right now. But Dr. Candace Pert has made a startling discovery about our bodies, and it directly links our human physical body DNA code, cellular genetic memory, to emotion, to feelings, and to history. There is an auric energy about the body that has just been discovered, and it goes beyond anything anyone can explain. It can only be explained by memory, this particular memory, by history. It can only be explained by an ancient history. And if that's all that would explain this, then where's it coming from? I started saying that there's got to be a way to ask this human body to talk to us and to help us in bringing health and happiness to people. Now I bet this sounds familiar to some of you who've been knowing this for a long time, doesn't it? I said this to one woman, and she said, "Yeah, you want to do yoga?" I said, "No, don't tell me somebody else has got my idea again. Come on. Can't I have one idea of my own?" And she said, "No." And then some other people have said, "No, look at this, study this," and the various physical modalities that have come along. And we are beginning to integrate them into the process that I do. And we are getting some astounding results. We have made amazing and dramatic inroads into the field of incurable disease. Guess what? There ain't no such thing. Now, I know that's a belief of a lot of you. I know a lot of you really believe that, and you probably can come to examples of friends that can prove it. But I can show it to you under a microscope. And I can put people into session, and I can show you where it's coming from in session. And I can show you how to turn lupus, multiple sclerosis, and cancer around. And I can show you how to work with people so that they and their own system can stop these diseases and they can cure them themselves. I don't cure it. You don't cure it. Medicine doesn't cure it. No one cures it but the person themselves. It is their system that does it. But it is the way that we are beginning to be able to work with that system that's getting amazing results. Now, I can almost hear the questions going off now. How do you do this? What do? You lay people down and do awful things to them? Yeah. No. When I first started doing it, I did it the way I did it. I realized if I could do it, anybody can, and that's basically what you'll see when you see us do a demonstration. We ask your unconscious part to communicate with us. We ask it to locate the place where it needs to work, to alleviate or change the problem, and then we begin working with it as it locates it. And let me assure you, the trick to any of this is not to get someone into a past life. That's easy. I can take anyone from this audience and teach them to do that in about 10 minutes. The trick is to get them out of it. The trick is to work with them so that the pain and the fear, the unknown, is resolved and released and gone, and the person's health then begins to improve because it no longer is affecting them. The trick is to find where that fits into a pattern in their life, and why that keeps a pattern of unwanted behavior constantly being repeated in their life. And we deal with that. Now, let me emphasize something. I'm a therapist. I do therapy. I work day in and day out with people who are ill, people who are disturbed, people whose lives are not working, people who have, in many instances, a crisis existing in their life in which they think they're not going to survive it if something isn't done. I'm sort of the court of last resort with a lot of them. One lovely little lady who was about 75 years old came to work with me about 4 years ago, and she said, Dr. Netherton, I'm desperate. I have migraine headaches to the point where I want to kill myself when they start. And she said, I've done everything. I've been to every doctor. I've been to everybody I can think of. And she said, nothing helps. And she said, you're the last kook I've got. If you don't work, nothing's going to. And I sort of wondered what she meant by kook. And then I remembered we were in Los Angeles at the time, so that probably was fitting. And I said, well, I can't do anything for you, but I may be able to help you do something for yourself. And we did. And about 4 weeks into therapy, she said, I want to quit now. And I said, why? How are your headaches? And she said, oh, I haven't had headaches for 2 weeks. And she'd had them every day practically. And I said, well, why didn't you tell me that? She said, you didn't ask me. Oh, well, why do you want to quit? You know, you're not really through with this. And she said, because in the morning when I wake up, if I don't have a headache, I don't know if I'm alive or not. And I thought that was pathetic. And I thought that was really a very unfortunate thing for her. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, I have waked up with a headache every morning of my life for so long that I know it keeps me alive. And I know that. I know that it is a source of life for me. I know I'm alive if I feel pain. And I said, well, I'll tell you what you do. In the morning when you wake up and you don't feel pain in your head, keep the obituary column of the paper near you. Check the obituary column. If your name isn't there, go on to work. If it is there, lay down. They're looking for you. She did what you just did. She laughed at me. And she said, that is sort of silly, isn't it? I said, no, it is not silly. It's a great psychological truth that we come to depend upon pain to keep us alive. And a lot of other things. So she said, okay, and we proceeded to finish it. What I find and what I put together from this process, it's really very simple. We are really very simple beings. It's our ongoing attempt to explain ourselves that makes us very difficult. If we would get our minds out of the way, back up and let go of the monkey stuff that goes on, we would find that our problems probably would be much fewer. Now, mankind was built to do one of two things in crisis: run or fight. That's what adrenaline is all about. The adrenaline rush comes to give you enough strength to get away or to fight. But we have introduced compromise, bargaining, talking, give and take, and everything else we can think of that thwarts that basic urge, that basic response. And as a result, what we've introduced to a lot of people is something that's rather devastating, and a lot of people spend a lot of time in it, and it's called shock. You can't stop what's going on, you can't get away from it, and you can't run, and you can't fight it, and you begin to go into a state in which you are just going into yourself to get away from it. And I'm finding that an awful lot of people are living in shock, and they just simply don't know it, or at least half in shock. And as I began to study this more and more, I began to realize that shock is probably the opening stage to death. And then I asked myself, okay, what is pain? And what is the fear of pain? The fear of pain has to be based upon the prospect of death. You're not going to be frightened of something if you don't feel that it's going to have some detrimental effect to you. The ultimate detrimental effect would be to kill you, right? You can't get much worse than that. I mean, if you're looking for the worst possible scenario, death is it. At least here in this conscious body, you think it is. And if you look at the fear that people bring to pain and the way of handling it, they live in shock, which means they never even have to know it's there a lot of times. And if indeed this is the opening stage to a death and to a death experience at the unconscious mind's level, then is it possible that this whole reincarnation can be broken down into just a very simple movement? Again, for behavior that is troubled, it will be to a lesser degree for other living. But could it be that this behavior begins an ascent into pain, fear, and numbness, leading toward a perceived point of death, and then as a pattern, It will either die, in which case they will bury you, or you won't die. And you'll begin to have a sense of survival and start out of that. So that what you'll have is a phase in life of reincarnational death and survival, rebirth. And as I began to chart the various people that I work with, I find that each session I did began to show this. It began to show that the session itself would start, it would move into a greater psychological depth. It would come to a point to where the fear would be so gripping, that person would say, the only way out is to die. The only way I have of handling this is to die. I can only give up and let him, her, it do whatever it wants to do. I have no control over this. I might as well be dead. If I keep working with them at that point, and I do, then they begin to turn that around and they begin to come out of that. They begin to get, the numbness leaves the hands and feet, the confusion goes away in the thinking, the color starts to come back to their face, and they begin to come up with feelings and words and expressions that begin to come back to life again. So that at the end of the session, they have been through an experience which, in a past life, and if that's where you're working, did kill them. They did experience physical death. And as their therapist, it's my job to see that that death is completed, it is finished, it is resolved. They do have a sense of freedom from that experience, and that they leave there with the infinite part of them intact, as it always was. And then to bring them into their life here and now, and back into a sense of living, back into a sense of coming alive again. And we get that by working with them at birth. And the birth trauma introduces into your life here and now that every past life that you're bringing in for resolution and completion in your life here and now. It also establishes how you're going to handle stress for the rest of your life. That's where the drug epidemics come from. When we began injecting mothers at giving birth and telling them, here, this will make you feel better. Here, you don't need to feel any pain. Here, it won't hurt if you just take this pill. We told the fetus that the way to handle pain and stress was to take an outside substance. And it isn't too long before addiction begins to take place with that. Also, it introduces the numbing and the out-of-touch feelings that mothers have at birth. And the fetus many times registers that as death. And unless that death is turned around during the birth process, then you may have a child here who cannot breathe at birth and will go on and die because they are born in that death mode. Many times, though, the child, of course, lives. Once the child lives at birth, then it has entered the living phase of that diagram. So, as I spread this over larger periods of time, I began finding that this also happened to all of the sessions that I was running. The soul of this person was directing a process that started with the first session, moved steadily into more threatening and challenging and frightening sessions, and then began to move into sessions that would bring it out and be completely free of the problem at the end of it. And that got to be very exciting. And I noticed everyone's little badge says reincarnation and healing. And I love coincidences, don't you? Aren't coincidences marvelous? Because on the plane up here I was thinking, I think I will slant this talk toward a healing process that will start with each person and evolve into, eventually, an entire planet. And I'm going to show you how reincarnation is going to do that and how it is doing that, in spite of what you may think of the condition of this world right now. About 5 years ago, I finally got through with the pyramids, and it didn't get any better. And I had begun at that point directing centers and teaching and working in Germany. And my wife said to me, "Why are we going to Germany?" And I said, "I don't know. They asked us." And she said, "Okay, are we going to go everywhere in this world they ask us?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Okay." And she said, "Do you know how they dress in Germany?" And I said, "No." It's very important for wives to know how they dress in these places, you know. So, on my couch began showing up a lot of asthmatic patients, a lot of patients who as children had their tonsils taken out, who as children had very, very heavily abusive families, fathers who were alcoholic, fathers who were pedophiles, fathers who had tempers that brought great physical harm to children, and anyone else that was involved with them. And as I began to work with this, almost immediately, the first thing I found was a concentration camp. And I thought, well, that makes sense. These people were born in the late 1940s. And what I found was that each one of them died in a concentration camp. And the one thing they were thinking going into the camp was, if I could just get to America, if I could just have gotten out of here and gotten to Canada, I could have just gotten my family to Australia, then we'd have been safe. And as soon as death comes in that camp, that's exactly what they did. Those souls began to incarnate in the last goal that they had set for themselves going into the death. Now, one of the first things I learned, and it's been consistently true, the manner in which you die in the past life, just immediately prior to this one, will determine the way in which your conception and birth takes place coming into this lifetime. Because it is a continuous experience working toward continual resolution, toward continuing the effort to become perfect and get back to the whole. And thus, people who died in those concentration camps, gasping and screaming for air and breathing gas, almost instantly find themselves in the birth process with a mother who's being given gas, who hears the doctor saying, push, push, and sounding very much like a camp guard giving orders. And the first thing they begin to realize is they have been born to a father who is viciously violent. And they have just re-established that camp again. They've been born into that camp again. Except this time they're going to begin to change it. It's not going to kill them now. They're going to survive it. This time they're going to take all of the horrors of that, and they're going to begin to find some way to change their environment and to get out of it and to see that it never happened again. Now, as I continued to work with this, what I found was that I was not getting a completion of the experience. And I began, by accident one day, saying something to one young lady I was working with about, she had had a miscarriage and during our work. I didn't know she was pregnant at the time. And she said, you know, my mother had a miscarriage. And I said, oh, right, okay. As we started to work, it became very evident that she was the first baby that died in utero. And I'm in working further with it, she was not miscarried. Her mother aborted her because it was a case of poverty, and it was a time when they did not want another child, etc., etc. And she and another friend of hers did an abortion at home, which ended the pregnancy. And the child died in uterus, and at the point she died, she said to her mother, you can't get rid of me this easily. I'll be back, and I'll be back when it's a better time and when we can get on with this. And the next thing she found, she made a great big U-turn and boop, came back in again. This time, it was completed and she was given birth into this abusive situation. And I began looking, where does this fit? What's the pattern that I'm seeing here? And what I was seeing, that when these people were taken into those camps, the first way out was to die. There had to be an experience of death in the camps before they could experience being out. And they were experiencing that death in the form of these abortions and miscarriages in the next uterus. Then they were coming back again, and this time, they could choose to come back after that death, get into the birth again, and this time survive. And the entire epidemic of child abuse and abortion and wars and fights about this all began to make sense. It all began to make sense because it is the very first step toward the healing of this planet with regards to that particular era of time. Now, please don't misunderstand me. Nothing I say here is intended to excuse anyone or take any responsibility from anyone where it belongs with regards to the Holocaust and the wars. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying for 1 minute that anything justifies what was done there. And if you've been in my office for a while and done that work, and watch what goes on with it, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is not an easy topic for people to get in and work with. But the people that died in those camps have gone around this world. In effect, they have said by their actions, you ignored what was happening. You helped keep a big secret in Germany. You helped, the world helped this happen because nobody believed it and nobody took action and nobody would stop it. Now, we are going to incarnate around this world, and we're going to begin the healing process that we have to go through around this world in order to get ourselves, our souls, through that bottomless pit of death in those camps. And we're going to make this world go through it with us, whether they want to or not. And that's what you're seeing today. You're seeing the opening phases of that. You're seeing these souls from those camps making demands for radical changes on this earth. You're seeing them go to extraordinary lengths to bring about changes in government so that that sort of thing can't happen again. You're also seeing some damaging things from it. You're seeing cults arise. You're seeing what would appear to be very vicious people working in very secretive ways to keep secrets and to enslave people, and which is, again, as an establishment of a camp. You're finding a huge tendency to want to cluster together sometimes, and cluster in poverty, and cluster in hopelessness, and cluster in gossip, and all the things that took place in those camps. But that too is part of the first step. That too is a part of the healing that's going to have to happen. And it's going to happen because these people are a part of your communities now. And they're a part of your communities now because the universal law of reincarnation has seen to it and allowed them to use that law to become a part of your community. Let me tell you something. You're not going to stop it. You're not going to be able to stop this. You're not going to stop it, and you're going to see it continue until every element, the viciousness and evil and horror that lasted in those camps is gone, and until the causes of it have been rooted out and brought into alignment with the universe and the healthy parts of the universe. And the next time you don't understand someone's behavior, ask them when they were born, which will be a big help to them, I'm sure. If someone's standing there yelling and screaming at you, and you say, "What's your birthday?" But if it's anywhere from 1940s and 1960s, then ask yourself, is this an abused child? Ask yourself, is this person that I'm dealing with not here in this room with me? Who are they really seeing when they talk to me? And if it makes sense what I'm saying, then I think you can change the way you deal with them. I think you'll want to change the way you deal with them. Because, there's anger in this, and there's desperateness. If you're in my office sometime, we have a sign that hangs in our waiting room, and it simply says, "Quiet, therapy in process." Now, I forgot something. I forgot to put a comma after the word quiet. What it simply means is, if you're waiting in our lobby, please be quiet, because there are others of us that are working. And I came out of the office one day, and one of my other clients was sitting there, and she said, "That sign is absolutely wrong. There's no such thing as a quiet therapy in this office. This is not quiet." And because what will come from offices where we're working, from any one of them, at any given time, will be that awful blood-curdling scream that comes when someone has just gone to the depth of their souls got a hold of themselves and dragged it all up and out of their mouth and through their being, and get it back and let it go out the window and through my ears and my head and my back and my, every other part of me that's registering it. And when you hear that, it's frightening if you don't know what it is. It's a source of joy if you do know what it is. Do you know what it's like to sit in a room with someone who is racked with pain and screaming and agony and crying, feeling joy for them? Do you know what a strange dichotomy of feeling that is? When you sit and watch someone that the average person would think is going to die any moment, and you as their therapist are ready to rejoice because they finally got there and they're finally doing it. And they're doing it right, and they're doing it well, and they fought a long, hard battle to get there. I've heard stories in my offices for the last 5 years that are sickening. I've heard stories that I don't even want to talk about. And this is the human race. And I keep trying to remind myself it is the human comedy. But I also, like I did in that church back there when I was 6 years old, I have to hope that, my God, folks, I hope this is not the jokes. I hope this is not it, because there's got to be a bright day coming somewhere. Some wise man once said, if you're going to be able to enjoy the beauty of the dawn, you got to get ready for it while it's still dark. And sometimes I feel like I'm right in the middle of the darkest part. Other times I feel good. There's some ray of hope on the far horizon there. The amazing thing is that 10 minutes after they've done this, 10 minutes and 4 boxes of Kleenex, 92 ear-piercing screams that have cleared the building. Police came to my office once. 6 great big burly policemen wanted to know what I was doing to that girl in there. You know what she was screaming at the time? Get your hands off of me. Stop. You're hurting me. Don't rape me. And I get to open the door, and here's this young lady, about 19 years old, laying on my couch. And I have to try explaining to these guys that this is therapy. Of course, what I get is, sure it is. At this point, I turned to her and I said, would you like to talk to these men for a moment? Now, she's lying there. She's been in the midst of this. She opened her eyes and said, sure. And she came over and she explained to them what was going on. And at that, thank goodness, my neighbor from across the street, who has nothing to do with me, except we've been neighbors for quite a while, came out and she said, oh, this goes on all the time. No. She says, go catch a criminal, for heaven's sakes. No. And so they sort of did something else. But after the horrors of this, and after the absolute terror and the screaming that goes on to release this stuff, within 10 minutes they're sitting up, they're laughing, they're smiling, they're happy. They feel their life forces begin to change. I get so tired of saying to people, breathe. Don't stop breathing. Just before I left, I said to one young lady, aren't you ever going to breathe again? Breathe. If you don't breathe, this is going to hurt like you know what. If you breathe, you'll go on through it. Breathe. So she, oh. There, you see? Isn't that better? She said yes, and she stopped breathing again. Well, if we hold our breath, we stay at status quo because we're afraid it's going to hurt more if we go on. I started yelling this at my son when he was playing soccer. Little guy, so this big. Now, I made the mistake of telling him I had a statue of the Happy Buddha in my office with his tummy and all the little kids hanging everywhere. And I said, if you rub the tummy of the Happy Buddha, it brings you good luck. So this little soccer team decided that they wanted the Happy Buddha. So I stand on the sideline unsuspecting one day, and this whole little soccer team goes out to play, and they all go by and rub my tummy. Now, wouldn't you know they won? So now we have a tradition that we have to go by and rub Dr. Netherton's tummy every time we have a... If I'm not there, they're going to lose. Well, no, daddy pressure is bad enough without adding this whole mystical thing to it with my tummy. So, but I told them, I said, if you guys get hurt and fall down, breathe. Get up, breathe, and go on. And my son, not too long after that, was hit. He went down, he grabbed his leg, and he's holding his breath, and he's crying, and he's laying 3 feet in front of me. I said, Drew, breathe. Breathe deeply into the pain, release it, get up, and go on. He started to breathe, he stood up, he shook it off, he turned and ran, and he kicked a goal. And when he came back, every little guy on the team's going, guys, you're going to hyperventilate, and then you can't do anything. But if it gets you to kick a goal, we're all going to breathe. And so I have to literally at times tell people to start breathing. I have to tell them to monitor their heartbeat. It's beating. It's not dead. Once we get through the crucial stages of this, then they go back and they look at what it is because they can remember it all. I do nothing to take away your memory. I do nothing to take away your ability to solve your own problems. I do nothing to depotentiate your capacity for total independent thinking. Anytime anyone on my couch needs to maintain or know that they're in control of what's going on, all they have to do is say that, and we take a break and they can stop it and go right back to it. And this is nothing that I'm doing to anybody. I don't know how to do things to anybody. I do things with people that helps them do things for themselves. Now, I would like to draw you a diagram of what I'm talking about because I want to explain something to you. How many of you have heard the old axiom, go into therapy and things get worse? Go into therapy and get a divorce. Not too long ago I was talking to some friends of mine and I asked how their daughter was. I'd had both her husband and the daughter in therapy, and the mother said, well, they did get a divorce. My son said, another resounding triumph for therapy. And I said, shush. That divorce was happening anyway. Neatness does not count, and spelling doesn't count. That's not what we're about here. Now, I want to simply use this as an example of what I'm talking about because I want to show you what we do in our lives. And we do it in minute ways and we do it in large and expanded ways depending on how we're living our lives at the time. If we start here, this is the start of unwanted behavior. This is the start of a developmental system which has brought pain and unwanted behavior into someone's life. As we start to work with this, we will be continuing to use unconscious processing toward a point where their reality tells them that is what's happening. We will be continuing to push them toward a reality at the bottom of this graph which says there's death there and you're not going to survive it. In a physical body where there is cell memory, breathing life, your philosophy tells you you're going to survive it when you're dead. But your reality is not able to experience that yet. So, many people cannot really understand or believe that they're going to live past this if they get into it. Everything that we do here is a constant going into unconscious mind, into the lower levels. We go past this into here, access the material we need to work with, and bring it back up so that it becomes a conscious memory that you can have choice about, and not an unconscious memory that you don't know about and is causing problems. Until it hits here. And at this point, you better hope that you have chosen a past life therapist who knows what they're doing. Because if you haven't, then there's going to be some definite problems that show up. Because invariably, people start talking about suicide right here. The only way out of this is to die. I might as well give up and die. There's nothing to live for. I've tried everything and nothing's working. There's total hopelessness and helplessness in this. If you don't know what you're doing with this process, if you don't understand, this is not a kid's game. Past life experiences are not something to take a voyeuristic view of, as though you're watching a movie. They get very real that way. Because what you must do is keep this process going until they begin to turn around and begin to experience a move toward being happy. Now, in order to do that, here we use the conscious mind. Not consciousness, conscious mind. And we use a movement from here down to access material that we have found here and then integrate up here. Do you understand the difference? This is a use of this is locating first at the unconscious level and pulling up to the conscious mind to begin to understand and integrate. This is using the conscious mind, who now has a lot of this available to it, to go into unconscious mind and begin to work with it further. Let's look at an abused child for a moment. Do you know what begins to happen in these sessions here? The abused child begins to hear what the consequences will be if they ever tell anyone what's going on. If you ever tell what's happening here, I'll kill you. I'll kill your dog. I'll kill your sister. I'll kill your mother. They'll come and take me away and you'll starve to death. I'll get you. I'll always be there. You're my child. You belong to me. I can do whatever I want to. And all the other horrors that come out of that script. Now, that person will hear these going into this. But when they start up here, there's one thing that starts to happen, because this takes it from fear, it takes it from affect into numb, paralyzed, fear, denial, and rationalization. That's because it's the only way they can stay alive. You're going to find numbness and paralysis primarily guiding and governing this side of this graph. But about here, a marvelous phenomenon starts to happen. They start to feel again. Very briefly, very tentatively, but they start to feel again in their bodies. We're not talking about a nebulous emotion out there somewhere. We're talking about fingers, hands, toes. We're talking about coming out of shock a little. Now, that's something they're not accustomed to doing, isn't it? When that pain and fear hit, and they can feel it, what's the only way they know to stay safe and not feel it and be happy, they think? To go back being numb again, which puts them right back over here. Now, what's the only way they can think of to get back over here? To find someone to abuse them. So they stay in that relationship, which is so painful. They stay in that addictive, compulsive behavior with the person that they're trying their best to get to marry them, and who won't do it, of course, because it keeps them over here, because they don't have to feel anything here. And as therapists, you keep working with that, and you keep pushing, and you get more feelings as you go on with this. And as the numbness continues to wear off, now you're going to hit denial. This never happened, I'm making it up. As they've been huge welts show up on their bodies, red and very discernible with handprints. As you turn them over, as they turn over on their back, you can see the stripes going across their back and down their legs from the belt that was being used on them. And that doesn't make any difference if it was when they were 3-year-olds in this life or when they were 3 years old 1,000 years ago. It doesn't matter. It's one and the same thing as far as this work is concerned. The mind doesn't know the difference. But again, what they will do, when they start to feel more, they will feel pain more. They'll have to start to give up denial. They'll come back to numbness over here. And you're beginning to see why it is so difficult to get people to come out of these states. Because they have learned to live over here where they can't feel as being a place where it's safe to be. Now, take out the word abuse, put in the word alcohol. Same thing. The alcoholic, when he starts trying to stop drinking, may get off of alcohol, but the moment something upsets him, what's he going to do? What's the only way he knows to be safe? He'll come from when he starts to feel here, back to addictive behavior here, and he'll go back into numbness again, because that's all he knows. But as a therapist, you keep pushing, and you keep working, and you don't stop. And you don't fall into this trap down here that says, it's hopeless and it's helpless, and I want to stop this, I want to stop now, I want to stop, get away from me, don't do this anymore. You keep working, and you keep working, and you keep working, and very slowly but very surely, it gets up here, and these feelings are much more prevalent. Now they're coming back toward normal. Now, let me tell you what can happen at this point, because it's another point that can bring this person right back into addictive and fearful behavior again. Now they begin to remember all the things that were told them over here that were going to be done to them if they ever told anybody. Those things begin to become part now of their conscious mind. And what they do is they realize that they have done everything so far that they were always told not to do. And at this point, if you're not careful, they go right back over into numbness and right back into addictive behavior, and they go right back into feeling abused and being abused again. But when you continue to work this through with them, it's an awful mess, isn't it? It's not this messy when you do it in my office. When you continue to work this with them, eventually they hit this. Once they hit that, if they can experience 5 minutes of happiness, you got them. If they can sit up and come back the next week and say, do you know something? For the first time in my life, I felt happy all day last Tuesday. You got them, because they know it can be done. Now they've had a taste of it, and now they'll go on until they can get that way the rest of their life. And now you as a therapist want to go out in the back somewhere and go, because you feel like you've just gone through this whole abusive period of time with them, and you really had to hang on, and you really had to stay in there, and you had to really prove that you were the one person that they could count on doing that. So, is it possible at this point to just project this onto our globe? Is it possible to say that we in the age of Pisces have been moving into this numbness and unconsciousness and reactionary stages until we reached World War II at the bottoming out period? Is that our death on this planet? Is that the point where it can't get any worse? Is that the point where the universe says, okay, if you really are working on being a victim on the Earth planet, then we'll give you victim. We will give you a situation which is so hideous and so victimizing that nothing can ever be worse than that. Then you've got to turn it around from there. So, have we done that? And are we indeed beginning up this side over here? And are we experiencing all the fear and pain and trepidation and anxiety that everyone feels when they start to come back alive again? Is that little still small voice that started screaming and trying to be heard low those many years ago back there saying, there's a different way, folks. You don't have to lay down and play dead. Is that finally going to be heard? Or all of those voices that cried so long in the wilderness, who were laughed at and who were called crazy and stupid, and all those visionaries who had dreams and dared to talk about them, are those finally going to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and say, I told you so? Whenever I come to a place like this, I genuinely believe it. Because there's a difference in the way you feel. You believe that? You believe there's a difference in the way you feel? There is. Believe me, I think I felt it all at this time. Because you see, I see you come here from all over the world, and all over the Western world at least, and the Eastern world, and I see you go back. And I see you take what this man teaches you. And I see you take what these people help you come to. And I know, you don't know it yet, but you're going to find it out when you get back there. I know what you're going back to. I know what's waiting for you. I know of the damage, the hurt, wounded children that are waiting back there. And I know what hurt them, and a lot of them. And I know what they want and what they need. And I know that if anything can do it, it's you. You don't judge. You don't condemn. You don't deal in good and bad or guilt. You deal in what is. And then you deal in what has to be done. And by so doing that, you begin to change the human spirit from that hypnotized behavior that has controlled us into a free-spirited behavior that has choice in it for people. People can choose to hurt if they need to, but they don't have to. They can choose to be happy. And isn't it mind-boggling that something that you can do with the human body can accomplish this? Because it was the human body that was so viciously attacked and destroyed. And it's the human body that is so viciously damaged when it's abused. So now comes something that is centuries old. It's been around how long? Does anyone know when yoga got started? Can you go back and say, well, in the year 3,000,002, in the caves somewhere outside of the desert? It's been around for how long? It's one of the most ancient wisdoms. And we've just discovered it, thank you. Or I have. But it's what people need, and it's what you're going to use. And let me warn you, though. I'll tell you what you're going to find. If you start going into yoga classes and you start working with people that you don't really know, if you're working in centers and places where you go back, and you find people becoming angry, you find people becoming resistant, you're finding people wanting to fight, and you're finding people who don't want to do this, but you find people who are hanging in there because they're determined. Look at who they are. They're trying to tell you something. In October, we're doing a national conference on past life therapy. And the theme of that is the integration of physical modalities into the therapeutic process. We're going to do intensive experiential workshops in yoga and intensive experiential workshops in craniosacral rhythm, the use of the craniosacral rhythms of the body as part of the therapeutic process. In conclusion, we're going to take the two of the people that go through those workshops, and we're going to then pull it together with the therapeutic process that I do to show how this all becomes one cohesive presentation and one cohesive experience. And I've already done that, so I can tell you how it works. It works with magnificent results. And it's something that's very easy to understand while you're seeing it. It's easy to understand what's going on. We are not talking about something that's going to take Harvard professors the next 6 years to develop a course plan for. Unfortunately, it's also not something that medical doctors can charge $850,000 for. So you may not be seeing it for quite a while. But it is a very simple, easy to comprehend, and it's a very easily achieved thing to do. When we work tomorrow night or tomorrow afternoon, you'll probably feel that what you're seeing is deceptively easy. And it is deceiving, but it is also easy. it's deceptive in that most people in this country think that you can't act this country. Now, I'm not in this country, I'm in Canada, so I can't speak for this country, but the one I came from. Most people there think you can't access this type of experience unless you're in deep hypnotic trance. Well, I got news for you. There's no such thing as deep, up, down, side, backwards, or anything else in the human mind. It's all right here and now, and you're not going to go deeper into anything. Once you give up the belief that you have to do something drastic to alter your consciousness in order to get to your problem, the rest of it falls into place fairly easily. And what we do is dehypnotize you. We remove post-hypnotic suggestions, be it from childhood, birth, or 4 lifetimes ago. And that's what you'll see. You'll see just a reversal of the process that put the human spirit under hypnosis, that perverted its ability to understand reality. I'm not talking to you any theory tonight. I'll be glad to go into that tomorrow. I'll explain what I'm doing before I do it and after I do it. Has anyone here seen what I do? Seen me work? Where did you see it? Yes, I know you. Hi. Thank you. You were in here, weren't you? Yeah. Yeah, from Nantel. Yes. Yes, of course. That's good. I thought you looked familiar a minute ago, but I couldn't put a name to you, so I still can't. I'm sorry. What? Yes. Yes, Claude. Hell. Well, see? What? Have I said anything that I didn't say before? I mean, oh, good. I'm always afraid somebody will say, but you said 2 years ago. Chances are I did. I just received an award recently, and they went back to 1974 and got tapes that I had said, and they were quoting things I said in 74. And do you know how cold that makes your blood run? For people to start holding you responsible for what you said in 1974, when I can't even remember back that far. I had no idea what I said. Fortunately, I said it was all pretty easy and safe. I hadn't gotten to the point of spouting off my mouth yet and saying, outlandish things. Well, everyone here, this will come to everyone as a new experience tomorrow. Generally speaking, when I talk to a group, I like to take questions. Now, I don't know, is that something you do here? Thank you. I was raised a good boy. You're supposed to ask for you. I'd be glad to answer your questions for anything you want to ask, except, may I ask you, please don't ask me to diagnose you here. Please don't give me symptoms and ask me to tell you where they're coming from in the past life. Mothers, please don't say, a friend of mine's child was born with da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and what do you think that would mean the child is going to be? I catch on to that, I know it right away. And mothers, those of you who have had children, don't start asking yourself what in the world you did to your child during birth. It's going to damage it. You did nothing. The child in you participated in that experience. And it wasn't just you doing something. Yes?
You know, like the 17 Cleopatras, is that just like an archetypical fantasy?
My 17 Cleopatras, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I've never found one. And everyone comes into therapy, this type of therapy, wanting to do that. And after about 3 or 4 months of it, they begin to realize this is not what this is about. I had one man who said he was Christopher Columbus. I could have thought of somebody I knew, couldn't I? And I started to work with it. He did live in that time, and he was standing on a street in which someone who could have been Christopher Columbus, I don't know, but a man got out of a carriage and he said, "Boy, I wish I were him." And at that point, his identity hung to those words. I wish I were him, but in fact, he was a poverty-stricken man. I don't find princesses and castles and Cleopatras and white princes on white horses and that sort of thing. I find peons plowing, people dying on battlefields. I think I find a little bit more of the real picture than the other. I've had several people sit up after a session and say, to think, I pay him good money to come here and do this. I also had several people say, you know something, if I were just going to make this up, if what I do on this couch is just coming from my fantasy, believe me, I would never make this up. There's no way in the world I would ever make this up. And every now and then, some sort of historical fact comes through that is so unique that it's very difficult to deny. I had a young woman who was being burned at the stake, and she wouldn't die. Now, it's important in this therapy to get people to die. You know, you don't want to let them hanging out there not dead yet. That's dangerous on the freeways in Los Angeles, particularly. We got enough people out there who don't know where they are without adding more to it. And this woman, and I could hear she's getting to the point where she's going to say, okay, I'm dead. And that's so that I'll let her get up and go home because she's tired. But she still has the headache, and she still has the feeling, and it's not quite gone, and she really can't say that she can release herself from this. And finally I said, what actually kills you here? What causes physical death? And she said, I can't breathe. And I said, oh, do you feel the flames? And she said, no. And I said, really? You don't feel the flames? And she said, no. I said, why? And she said, the people of the town here love me. They like me. I was their folk doctor. I blended their herbs. I delivered their babies. And the only reason that they're killing me is because of some political something going on somewhere. It's not like they at all, you know. And she said, but they like me. They have put the wood in a large circle around the post so that the fire burns up the oxygen and I suffocate, but I don't have to feel the pain of the flames. It was the kindest thing they could do for me. Now, I don't think you're going to lay down on my couch and just make that up, even if you could think of it. There's another question from someone. Way in the back. Can you yell out?
Me?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay. As a matter of fact, I have two questions. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask two, but the first question.
Thank you.
Okay. The one question that I will ask is, if you yourself face this kind of therapy.
Friend, I would never stand up here and dare do this if I hadn't. That would be the height of unethical behavior. I have spent over 1,400 hours on my own couch. Yes, I have done this therapy. I've done a lot of it for my own, changing my own life, and a lot of it to develop the therapy. And I keep on doing it. I'll probably do it when I go home to process what I've done here. And one of the first things we teach anyone coming into it is how to work with yourself, because I hate therapy junkies. Addiction to therapy is no different than addiction to liquor. It's all the same thing. Did I answer your question?
Yes, very good.
Thank you. Yes.
I was talking to a fellow tonight at supper time, and he didn't believe in this at all. He said it was, all hogwash, and about reincarnation. And I'm wondering what you would say to him. He's here tonight, and what would you say to him to convince him that reincarnation is real?
Nothing. People who believe in reincarnation don't need to be convinced. People who don't, there's nothing you can say. I will tell you one thing. The one thing I will tell you, the greatest success I have had down through the years were with people who did not believe in reincarnation. Because I work with a lot of people who don't. And you don't have to believe in it to work with me. Chances are you're going to when you finish, but you don't to start. And the only thing I'll say to anyone about reincarnation is stop and think just a moment. We are all energy. You can't destroy it. You can transmute it, you can change it, but you can't destroy it. It has to go somewhere. Where does it go? It took nature 10 million years to dig the Grand Canyon. That's a hole in the ground. I do not think you can create man's souls in 75 years. It's a little more important than just a hole in the ground. So I think if you look at the continuity of the universe and the energy that makes it run, then maybe you want to ask yourself, where do we go? What happens at death? And maybe you want to ask yourself, what's the most logical explanation you can think of? Metaphor? No. That isn't easy and it isn't logical. Symbol? No. That has to be created out of a system that man created. The most logical answer is, from memory that you come up with, is that you were there. There's a part of you. And look around you. You live in a world of reincarnation. Trees do it. Nature does it. Cells in your body do it. Now, you may want to call what those of us in human form have done with reincarnation a lot of hogwash. That may be perfectly legitimate. But the cycle of life and birth and death, I don't think you can quite dismiss that by saying it's a lot of hogwash. And there's one other thing that I might say. Methinks he protesteth too much. Yes.
Could you say some more about what you discovered or in your therapy sessions about the last thought at the moment of death?
Oh, yes, the last thought at the moment of death. That's not as easy as it sounds. That's about an 8 to 10 week course in our teaching. How to work death and how to clear death is something that is very, 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 very important. And the last thought at death is something that is of monumental importance. And you have to be sure it's your last thought and not someone around you. If someone is dying on a battlefield and they're unconscious, then their conscious mind is already gone. And they will be hearing all the words of pain being said around them at the same time. You have to know how to work with that. You must clear the voices that are dying around them first, and then you must go into their own reality, and you must work with their reality. And you must be sure that everything that is done is theirs. If you do that, there'll be a sense of freedom that they can't deny. If they don't get that freedom, then you must go back in, and it's not just the word of death, it's the formula for resolution that gets put into place. It's the promise that they make themselves to continue for resolution and how, what they're going to do that. It's an astounding thing sometimes to see how this falls into place. I've often been sorry that I'm alone in my office many times because I get so confounded at watching it work that I wish I could turn to somebody and say, "Did you see that? Did you see that?" There's a television show in the United States in which one of the guys says, "I love it when a plan comes together." And there are times when I want to say that to somebody. I love it when this stuff comes together. But if I could only work in 2 areas, I would choose the death of a lifetime to work and birth in this lifetime, because they are plug-in points. And it doesn't matter if you believe that you died in that lifetime at all. That is not important. It's your story. It's your grade B movie. Wait a minute. I mean, I get in big trouble if I don't swap back and forth here. Yes, the gentleman in the white shirt. You, yeah.
Everybody has gone through traumatic experiences in past lives, right? Why is it that some people seem to have adjusted quite well, that are living their lives normally and are feeling basically fine and doing okay?
Well, I have a lack of people like that on my couch. I don't see those folks very often. Is it possible to turn this lights up? Can I turn the lights? You people are all dark. You look like no. Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Why is it that some people who have gone through serious and traumatic things in their past lives are not in touch with them now? They're living healthy, happy lives. And that is quite true, and thank heavens that they are. the soul's developmental stages are not just made up of fear and trauma. They're made up of joy and happiness and hot and cold, black and white, yes and no, the extremes of the yin and the yang. If you never had a happy, healthy lifetime, the others wouldn't bother you. You would never know that what to strive for. You would never have something to get back to. And that's what people are doing. They're into that period of the soul's development when there is a happiness, there's a centeredness, they're getting their just reward. They work very hard for that probably, and as such, usually it's consolidating a lot of aspects for themselves.
Would it mean though that you would have to go into like the next lifetime to experience something that happened
Yeah.
in this lifetime? Or maybe it's not affecting it this lifetime?
That's just it. It's not affecting you this lifetime. You have to look at the dead, how they die, and see what it's going to introduce. Also, there are a lot of people that learn to live as normal with things that other people would never accept as normal and go to work on it. Depends on your definition of normal.
One last question.
Thank you. Yes.
Two pieces of information about other than the Catholic Church teaching about
What religions have dropped reincarnation as far as theology from their teachings? Everyone, I'm sure, knows the Catholic Church did it. If you want to know what that is, read the teachings of Justinian. It was the time of Justinian, the teachings of Origen. He was the priest that was the theologian with regards to the rebirth process as taught in the Catholic Church. There are Catholic priests today who are saying that there's nothing in their faith and in their Bible that tells you that you cannot believe in reincarnation. Now, they're going to shoot them, I think, 2 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, but they're still saying it. And they say it quietly still. Most of the religions I know either come from that and thus have that built in, or they believe in it. But I'm very limited with my. If you're not Southern Methodist, Southern Baptist, Catholic. Now, let me speak about Judaism just a little bit. I speak at one of the largest Jewish synagogues in Los Angeles, and their rabbi completed his training in India, and he completed it in such a way that he could have been a guru, a Catholic priest, or a rabbi. And he chose rabbi because that was what his heritage was. His parents were Jewish. And it's interesting because I sit in their services, and this man is speaking about reincarnation. He's talking to them about the facts of it, and he says, any of you who do not believe in reincarnation are not reading your scriptures correctly, and if you will come to me, I'll show you where to read that so you'll know what you're talking about. And I think that's astounding. I mean, that's just, you don't hear that very often coming from organized religion. But I've talked to other Jewish scholars, and they tell me the same thing. They say it's there, and it was in the teachings, because they, believe it or not, go back much more to the Essenes than other people do. And that's where it all is contained. If you want to study this, really, go study the Essenes. From the Qumran Desert tribes forward, 250 years before Christ.
Thank you, Dr. Netherton, for your wonderful subject on reincarnation and regression. But 2 points you touch the truth. Though you did not understand the yoga, but the exactly yoga philosophy you mentioned without knowing. One point is the lost thought makes your future birth. Lost thought is very powerful. At the time of death, you are thinking of your wife, children, home, which very rarely, because most of the things goes how we are going to escape the death, the fear of death. Remember, whatever you think, the last thought will determine your future birth. That is really clear. And you touch that point very well. Also, at the birth, you have been played back just before you are born. And playback of all your past lives, not life, one life, past lives to you. This is also yogic theory. And this past life like playback in a session in the TV, about a 1 hour session. You can see the whole Churchill's life, or King George's life, or Patton's life, etc. So everyone is given a flashback of the past memory. This is also yoga. And they cry, frightened, my God, I had to go back again into this world and do all these things again. I had to get married, I had to be born as a baby, and then I'm white, I can't talk to my mummy, and I cried. And the mummy gave me milk for that, thinking that I'm hungry. And again I cried because I had colic pain. My mummy thought I got more hunger, so he took more milk. And I could not explain what was happening. Then I grown up as a child, and went to school and the Olympics and beating the exams and so forth. And finally I got married, I had children, grandchildren. And then I died of cancer or blood pressure. That frightening death experience. Not one several lives to be given back. This is one of the things people who doesn't believe in reincarnation. This is one of the answers they gave. Why are you afraid of dying? That's asked this question. Why are you afraid of dying? Suppose you touch a rat and the rat bites you. The next time you won't touch a rat. That means you got a memory of that bite. So if you don't have a memory of the past life and especially death experience, then why are you afraid of dying? Yogis are not afraid of dying. Dr. Netherton, yeah, I'm not afraid of dying. But I'm afraid of something else. What's that? I'm not afraid of dying, but what's afraid of what? No. Rebirth. Again I had to come back and start the yoga camp. I had to cut the tree. I had to collect all these people. I had to fund all the symposium and make them people understand about yoga, etc. And I had to collect all the students from various parts of the world. And I remember I was Swami like to make my life impossible. I pray God is sufficient. Yogis are after coming rebirth. It's not merely I'm talking in joke. Swami, that is, oh my God, I can escape from all the people. Thank you, goodbye to everybody. That's why several times I died. In fact, I died in one of the accidents nearby, and then I almost died in the cave in the Himalayas. And I dropped several times in the Ganges. I can do instance of that. But each time I died, they brought me back. I was unhappy, my God, what are they doing to me? They took me out of jail and put me back in jail again. So you've been living it like that. Ask all the people who have near death experience, people who died by heart attack and so forth, or other accidents, and they're visited in the hospital. You ask everybody, irrespective of Catholic, Protestant, Jew, believer, non-believer. You never read that? What they say? What they were resuscitated in the hospital past. They don't want to go back. They said, why did you bring back? They're afraid of coming back. The birth is painful because of that fear. My God, I had to go through all this again and I had to die. So that point, you touch it up. But only one point you miss is, your regression is only just one life coming down. No, it's demand. That's right. That's the problem. I was in Auschwitz on my way to Poland. He mentioned about the people in the concentration camp. I was both places. I was I went in Munich nearby Dachau concentration camp, and I saw Auschwitz concentration camp. In the front concentration camp, it's like a flower and as if it's nice camp. And once they go inside and pass the special area and the gate, they've gone into that gate. There's a sign. You cannot escape from here. Only one way you can escape, to a chimney. You can only escape through chimney. Means you go to gas and then your body will be cremated and you go into the chimney. That way you can escape. Imagine the prisoners came into that camp with that idea, children, women, men, and know they cannot escape now. And they would know that fish will live about 30 days, and others may do only 5 days, and they'll be going to smoke, etc. I went inside, I saw actually the prisoners lived in that, and one small room, it's all instant. Okay, you have done such a crime, just you'll be shot tomorrow or be hanged. And that's all. Just in a 2 rounds to judge. And that room, that's what I saw the room. And one priest, a Catholic priest, also was condemned to die, which he stayed longer because of the priest. And next to that, as soon as they come, there's an open, there's a wall. Now, still you can see where the prisoners are brought every morning and evening, and brought and then shot. And the priest shout prayers. That's the only way the people, have some people at the last moment. And the fear of these people, you can't believe. Then another place you can see, just hanging, just a small tiny, just a rack like that. And the people are brought and then just hanged and then taken off. And that goes on day and night, hanging. I went and my God, people are still screaming, they are not dead. You think they're dead? The people are just because they hanged and shot, they're dead. Their astral body is still hovering there. And they're crying for help, as he mentioned in a different way. They're still asking, how can you do to us like this? No one knew what was going on in this. Every day, death and shooting, is a day and night. It's not just a force of one, for 24 hours it forces this. And then the chimney was belching ashes of the human. And then not far away, another place, camp, the train comes inside. And as soon as the train comes, barracks and miles of the barracks are created. And the women and men are separated from the train inside, directly goes inside the train to the camp, and the lock. And from that onwards, they cannot see the relatives and friends, they are all separated. And day and night, the chimney is belching, and the ashes falling from that all over the countryside, where the farmers have the good harvest by the human ash falling from the heaven. They did not know. They thought train is coming for a nice vacation. They were screaming. How could us know? All the people of the world kept quiet. So he mentioned that too. That's true. And also in Dachau, that Germany, is not far from Munich. And most of the people died in Dachau are the political prisoners. They are hanged, and I saw that also. The oven, you can still see. I went and saw the oven where the bodies have been brought in gas. That's a shower like gas chamber. They go inside, they get completely gas, and the body immediately brought into the oven and then thrown into that. And that day and night is going on. And their body is not even cold. Enough to be not even dead, half dead, and they're brought into the skin. I saw that suffering. It is true. I had done myself. Whenever I went into that place, my body is not. I'm afraid of death. These people are still crying for help. Then I had a peace festival in Berlin. When I flew over West Berlin. We had a Kauri ceremony, walking to the same street where Hitler marched with Nazi army and the Gustav. First time they were singing, and I thought, oh my God, how many souls, not only concentration camp, many people died in Berlin, civilians, not only soldiers. They were screaming. So and I was the double bus from soldiers. They were screaming. So and I was the double bus from London. We were going to India, and we had to cross the England coastal area, and that's the place where D-Day took place. All the people, then the soldiers, thousands and thousands of boats and things came to the French coast. You don't believe. In fact, it's my personal experience. People are still screaming, dying in that coast, both sides of that coast, in London and in the France. It's not just their life is going to end because they're dead. That's very simple. Oh, everything is going to end. They're still screaming for help. But who knows that? We think that life only lives for 100 years or small. But life continues. I think one of his thoughts, very beautiful. It was very, though he did not understand the yoga philosophy, he said the same thing. Exactly what yogis say. Everything. But his knowledge is not come from the book reading or from our religion, as he is not one of the Hindu, and Trinity, and man, definitely don't believe in